Hello, good day everyone. This is the continuation of the reports of Miss Isatam. Now let's talk about non-paper and pencil assessment test. So here's our following objectives. Define performance-based assessment, enumerate examples of performance-based assessment, and develop performance-based assessment. We have two types of assessment methods. The first one is paper and pencil assessment test. The second one is the non-paper and pencil assessment test. The paper and pencil assessment test has been discussed already previously by Miss Isatam. So now let's talk about non-paper and pencil assessment test. Now under the non-paper and pencil assessment test, we have essays, oral presentations, role play, practical exams, performance tests, portfolios. Alright, so when we say non-paper and pencil test, we give an assessment to students that's beyond recalling and memorizing. You give them an assessment which a student can apply their skills or knowledge in real world situations. This type of assessment is very important. According to Kendall and Manzano 2012, the paper and pencil test is inadequate to measure all forms of learning. In short, there must be an action or like real world demonstration so that you can testify that the students can really apply the knowledge and skills in a real world situations. How they work with objective and non-objective test. So when we say objective test, that is referring to paper and pencil test. And when we say non-objective, that is for non-paper and pencil test. So we have here an example assessing a science concept. For objective test or paper and pencil test, a quiz on vocabulary, producers, consumers, decomposers. So mostly it's all about recalling, memorizing, something like that. So that is an objective test. When we say non-objective assessment, students create a fluid web diagram, write a paragraph explaining the flow of energy. So based on the examples given on the slide, non-objective assessment will allow students creativity, critical thinking skills, and gauge their deeper understanding towards the concept or the subject. It is like measuring how much they have learned when they're given with an authentic assessment or non-objective assessment. Alright, so we have an alternative names of non-paper and pencil assessment test. The first one is authentic assessment. Second one is performance assessment. A third is alternative assessment, and the last one is direct assessment. So those are the other names of non-paper and pencil assessment test. Now here we have the cone of learning. This is according to Edgar Dale in 1969. So in this cone of learning, it says after 2 weeks, we tend to remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we say, 90% of what we say and do. This study shows that a student can learn an immense knowledge, skills, and understanding in a vast area when they're going to do some dramatic presentation, simulating the real world experience, and doing the real thing. And again, according to the cone of learning, 90% of what we say and do. Aside from the cone of learning, we have what we call the learning pyramid or knowledge retention rate. This is the source adapted from the National Training Laboratories Institute of Applied Behavioral Science Learning Pyramid. Here you'll see the learning pyramid was divided into two categories. We have passive teaching methods from 5% to 30% and participatory teaching methods from 50% to 90%. The retention rate for lecture is only 5%, reading 10, audio or visual 20, demonstration is 30, discussion group is 50, practice by doing 75, and teach others is 90%. The similarities between the cone of learning and the learning pyramid is that they can get the highest percentage when they're going to put their skills and knowledge into actions. And here in this learning pyramid, they can have the highest retention rates when they're going to share their knowledge to others or teach others on what they have learned. That is why we have the so-called class presentation, or in the modern world we have the so-called PowerPoint presentation, because in that way they can have the highest retention rates. Now, how come you say that? It's because the presenter or the students is conducting a thorough research before presenting the topic. According to John Dewey, 1859 and 1952, experiential learning, learning by doing. Now, why use authentic assessment? We need to use authentic assessment to students so that we can see if they can really apply the knowledge in a real-world task. When we're using authentic assessment, we're like helping the student develop their critical thinking, strengthen their problem-solving skills, as they are very important in the future or in any job or any job-ready skills. Or so that in the near future, they will not get too bombarded by the hard or difficult situations because they have already mastered all those skills that are needed to resolve the problem. Now, one examples of authentic assessments, essays. When we say essays, it is classified as non-objective test. So partly, it will be considered as paper assessment test because it involves writing, right? However, when we dive deeper, what essays is all about, it involves critical thinking skills. We let students express their authentic self and organize their thoughts on a subject matter. That is why essays is part of the authentic assessment. In an essays assessment, do you think you can rate the students objectively or subjectively? So the answer is subjectively, because in giving your opinion or expressing your thoughts, you cannot say that the student's answer is incorrect. We have different perspective, so it might be it might against your perspective, but it might seems correct to the student's perspective, so the ratings would come subjectively. So in order to avoid biases in giving scores, teachers should formulate specific criteria or an organized criteria for an essay. Now let's find out an examples of criteria for an essay. So, first example for criteria for essay is formatted like this. So, score will be given in a percentage format. We also have the same like this, giving scores to students using percentages, but in a different format, just like this. The criteria is being presented in a tabular format. We have another form of criteria, still in a tabular format, but this is called 4-point score because the highest score on a specific criteria is 4 and the lowest score is 1. Now let's move on to the second example of authentic assessment. It's called oral presentations. So examples of oral presentations: class presentations, group discussions, debates, oral exams, and project presentations. Or in short, oral presentations assess speaking and communication skills. For the third one, we have a role play. So I think we already know what role play is all about. It is portraying the role of a specific character. So here the student act real life scenarios. That is why it is part of an authentic assessment. Next is practical exams. When we say practical exams, those includes lab experiment, assess hands-on skills or application of knowledge. Next, we have performance tasks. Example of performance tasks: design a garden, create campaign, talk show, design a website. So the same with other examples, performance task requires applying the knowledge in a real world scenarios. Now, an example of performance test. Let's say you're discussing about the different types of campaign. Now, after the discussions, you would like students to create a campaign that would help their community. Like the campaign is all about the problems or situations found within their community. Now the continuation will be reported by Miss Christine Joy Bensig.